Long before coins clinked in pockets, before gold dazzled kings, and before paper money promised value with ink and signatures, humans were already living under an invisible force that quietly shaped behavior, relationships, and power. That force was debt. Not financial debt as we imagine it today with banks and interest rates, but social, moral, and recorded obligation. Debt existed before money because humans needed a way to remember promises in a world where survival depended on cooperation. Money did not create debt. Debt created money. To understand this, we must go back to a time when humans lived in small communities. In these early societies, people did not trade like modern markets. A hunter who brought back meat did not demand immediate payment from everyone who ate. A farmer who shared grain during a bad season did not expect instant exchange. Instead, people lived inside a web of obligations. You helped today because someone else would help tomorrow. These debts were not counted in numbers, but they were remembered. And memory in a small group was enough. But as communities grew larger, memory began to fail. Villages turned into towns, towns into cities. Strangers lived side by side. Trust weakened. No one could remember who owed what to whom. This is where debt transformed from an informal understanding into something that needed structure. Humans did not invent money first. They invented record-keeping. Debt became written. The earliest evidence of economic activity in human history does not come from coins or cash, but from clay tablets. In ancient Mesopotamia, around 3000 BCE, scribes recorded debts owed in grain, silver, livestock, and labor. These tablets were not money. They were promises frozen in time. They tracked who owed barley to the temple, who borrowed seed for planting, who was late on repayment. These records were so central to society that writing itself may have been invented for accounting, not storytelling. Silver was used as a unit of account, not as a coin you carried. A farmer did not receive silver when he borrowed seed. Silver simply represented value. It was a measuring stick. Money at this stage was imaginary. Debt was real. This is the first shocking truth. Ancient economies ran on abstract value long before physical currency existed. Temples and palaces became the first financial institutions. They stored surplus food, redistributed resources, issued loans, and enforced repayment. If you borrowed grain and failed to repay, consequences followed. Sometimes those consequences were brutal. Debt slavery emerged when people could not repay what they owed. Entire families could be absorbed into servitude, not through war, but through unpaid loans. Debt, not money, was the tool of control. This reality challenges the common story we are taught, that barter came first, then money, then credit. In truth, large-scale barter economies never really existed. Anthropologists have found little evidence that societies relied purely on barter before money. Instead, they relied on credit. People tracked obligations over time. Barter appeared mainly between strangers or enemy groups, not within communities. Debt was the glue that held societies together, and sometimes tore them apart. As debt grew more complex, so did the need for fairness and limits. Ancient rulers understood that uncontrolled debt could destroy social stability. In Mesopotamia, kings regularly declared debt jubilees. These were moments when debts were erased, slaves freed, and land returned. These were not acts of kindness. They were acts of survival. If too many people fell into debt slavery, armies weakened, food production collapsed, and rebellion followed. Debt forgiveness was a reset button for civilization. Ancient religious laws reflected this understanding. In the Hebrew Bible, debt forgiveness was commanded every 50 years. Interest was restricted. Loans to the poor were morally regulated. These were not spiritual ideas alone. They were economic survival strategies. Religion became a tool to manage debt, because debt had the power to break societies. As trade expanded beyond local communities, debt systems encountered a new problem: portability. A debt recorded in one city meant nothing in another, unless there was trust between them. This is where money began to appear, not as a replacement for debt, but as a settlement tool. Money allowed debts to be transferred, cleared, and closed between strangers. It turned long-term obligation into instant resolution. Coins emerged much later, around the 7th century BCE in Lydia. They were revolutionary not because they created value, but because they simplified settlement. A stamped coin represented an officially recognized discharge of obligation. Instead of remembering who owed what, you could hand over metal and walk away free. Money was freedom from memory. States quickly realized the power of this system. Governments issued coins to pay soldiers, then demanded taxes in those same coins. This forced people into the monetary system. Money became political technology. Debt made it necessary. Coins made it efficient. Even then, debt never disappeared. In fact, money expanded debt. Credit markets grew. Loans became standardized. Interest rates formalized. Ancient India had sophisticated lending systems. Ancient Greece financed wars with borrowed money. Rome expanded empire on credit. Money allowed debt to scale beyond imagination. Rome provides a powerful lesson. As long as Roman money was trusted, the system worked. But when emperors debased coins to pay debts and armies, trust collapsed. Inflation followed. Debt became unbearable. Social unrest grew. The fall of Rome was not just military, it was financial. Debt mismanagement weakened the foundation. Across history, this pattern repeats. Money comes and goes. Forms change: shells, coins, paper, digital code. But debt remains constant. It adapts. It survives. It evolves. Even today, most money is created through debt. When banks issue loans, new money is born. When loans are repaid, money disappears. This means modern money is still a promise, just like ancient clay tablets. The uncomfortable truth is that money feels solid, but debt is the real engine. Debt connects past, present, and future. It allows humans to borrow time. Farmers borrow against harvests. Students borrow against careers. Governments borrow against generations not yet born. Civilization runs on faith in tomorrow. This is why debt is emotionally powerful. It carries shame, pressure, obligation, hope, and fear. Ancient societies understood this instinctively. That is why debt was regulated, forgiven, feared, and weaponized. Debt could enslave, but it could also build cities. It could destroy families, but also fund innovation. When money arrived, it did not replace moral debt, it disguised it. Numbers replaced faces. Contracts replaced relationships. Obligation became impersonal. This made economies grow faster, but also made debt easier to ignore. Ancient people feared debt because they could see its consequences directly. Modern people fear debt because they cannot see its full cost. In a strange way, we are closer to ancient systems than we realize. Digital money is invisible. Most transactions are numbers on screens, just like Mesopotamian accounting. We trust institutions to keep records, just like temples. Governments manage debt with promises of future growth, just like ancient kings. The technology has changed, but the logic has not. Debt existed before money because humans needed a way to organize trust in growing societies. Money was invented to manage that debt, not eliminate it. Every coin, every bill, every digital transaction is ultimately a tool to settle an obligation. Strip away the symbols, and what remains is a promise between humans. Understanding this changes how we see money. It is not wealth itself. It is a language for debt, a way to remember, transfer, and erase obligation. Ancient civilizations did not accidentally invent this system. They were forced into it by complexity, survival, and scale. In the end, debt is older than money because obligation is older than trade. The moment humans relied on each other, debt was born. Money simply gave it shape. And as long as humans plan for tomorrow, debt will remain the silent force behind civilization, ancient, powerful, and impossible to erase.